Greetings and welcome to the presentation from upa7.org, and today we'll pick up a current topic of controversy amongst Davidians, and this is the question of the Vanguard and the Wave Sheaf, and how are they related? So here will be the questions we'll address. Who are the Vanguard and its army? Who represents the Wave Sheaf of the living? A lot of controversy on this one and confusion. So we're going to look at that. And what about the wave loaves of the living? Who's that? And what do the types reveal? And why is there so much confusion amongst Davidians? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's because there are a lot of private opinions being taught out there. And so our goal today, our object, is to seek for clarity and go to the source, the golden bull, and find the answers there and settle the issue once and for all. So this document this is the origin of the current controversy. This document has been circulated around called the Revelation of the Vanguard and its Army, and asking the question of who's the number of the first fruits of the dead and what's the number of the first fruits of the living. So this is being revealed apparently by a certain Harold Julimus, who claims to be a Davidian reformer out of Freeport, Grand Bahama. In this document, the following conclusions are arrived at. 1, that those who die in the faith of the three angels' message from 1844 up until Ezekiel 9 are the wave sheaf of the living, and 2, the Vanguard. The other conclusion from this study is that the first fruits of the living are those who die in the faith of the three angels' message plus the 144,000. So this should raise some red flags. Is this true? Is this really from the Golden Bull, or is this really just another private uninspired opinion? So we're going to go to the rod ourselves and seek for clarity and teach only that which is published. So we'll begin with this text for meditation. We should all pay in mind to this, coming from Christian Experience and Teachings, page 203, the writings of Ellen White. It reads, "It is necessary that our unity today be of a character that will bear the test of trial. We have many lessons to learn and many, many to unlearn. God and heaven alone are infallible. Those who think that they will never have to give up a cherished view, never have occasion to change an opinion, will be disappointed. As long as we hold to our own ideas and opinions with determined persistency, we cannot have the unity for which Christ prayed. When a brother receives new light upon the Scriptures, he should frankly explain his position, and every minister should search the Scriptures with the spirit of candor to see if the points presented can be sustained by the inspired Word. The servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle unto all men, apt to teach, patient, in meekness, instructing those that oppose themselves, if God peradventure will give them repentance to the acknowledging of the truth." 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 24 and 25. So this is very relevant to our current discussion. Is it possible that we have some things to unlearn in our ideas about the wave sheaf and the Vanguard? And the answer will be certainly yes. So in this case, this brother Harold is claiming to have new light about the Vanguard and the army, so we're going to go to the Scripture and see if it's sustained by the inspired Word. And if not, then we will strive to teach and help others in meekness come to acknowledging the truth found in the shepherd's rod. So by way of quick review, we'll ask a couple questions. Who are the antitypical wave sheaf of the dead? And who's the antitypical wave loaf of the dead? Because this kind of sets the foundation to understand the wave sheaf for the living. So we really enjoyed the charts. This inspired chart on the ceremonial harvest clearly identifies that the wave sheaf of the dead, if you look at the chart down on the bottom, there's the cross. And on the 18th day of the first month, the wave sheaf, the very day that the wave sheaf was offered, Christ was resurrected and those with him. And they became the first fruits of the dead, the wave sheaf of the dead. And then 40 days later, over here under the big P is the 120 gathered in the upper room. They became the wave loaves of the dead, and they in turn gathered the second fruit. So that's the section that most Davidians have no dispute over. The question becomes, well, what happens for the living? That's where things get interesting. So we're going to look into that in more detail. But just by way of review, we'll see that this reference, that Christ is the antitypical wave sheaf of the dead. And this is track number 3, page 79, and it reads, "For more than 1,000 years, the annual waving of the sheaf pointed forward to its antitypical event, the resurrection of Christ. And as Christ arose on the very day that the wave sheaf was to be offered, the day after the Sabbath, let no one attribute the singular occurrence of these two events on that day to mere coincidence or any other cause other than divine design. He was the antitypical wave sheaf, declares the spirit of prophecy, and his resurrection took place on the very day when the wave sheaf was to be presented before the Lord." Desire of Ages, page 785. So Christ was clearly the antitypical wave sheaf. No mistaking. And we go on to the next paragraph, and it clarifies, "So Christ, the first fruits, and those who with him at his resurrection came forth from the grave, raised to everlasting life, were the antitypical wave sheaf of the dead. And since the wave sheaf of grain pointed forward to the ingathering of the first fruits of the field, just so those who arose with Christ, being the first fruits of the dead, pointed forward to the ingathering of the gospel's first fruits, the 120 disciples. But," notice the word but, that's giving us that there's additional meaning here. "But as those who arose with Christ ascended with him as trophies of his victory over the death in the grave, they thereby became a living type." And thus, and this is where we're going to move into the question of who's the living wave sheaf. So that's track 3, page 79. I encourage all to read that entire section on the ceremonial harvest in track number 3. So once again, coming back to our chart, we have the wave sheaf of the dead offered on the 18th day of the first month, Christ and those who are resurrected with him, and then later the wave loaves, the 120 apostles are gathered in the upper room, and they became the instrument to gather the second fruits of the dead. So that all is all straightforward. Where it gets interesting here is up at the top we have 1844, and you see right next to it there's the wave sheaf of the living, the first fruits. So the question is, who's that? That's where the controversy arises. So here's really the essential question. And what I'm going to present here, there's the question, who are the antitypical wave sheaf of the living? And what you'll find is that there are different ideas out there and a lot of confusion because there are different teachings out there. But here are 3 common teachings that we find. The question is, which one's correct? So the first one, A, those who die in the faith of the 3 angels' message from 1844 up to Ezekiel 9. And this is the view that's coming from Harold Julimus, the Davidian reformer. Answer B, a portion of the 144,000, the Vanguard, the first of the first fruits. This is a view that we at upa7.org have held for a while. However, in this controversy, it always presents an opportunity. Is there perhaps something that we need to unlearn? And finally, answer C, those who were resurrected with Christ. So the question becomes, what is the correct answer? And the answer is C. Let's look at the evidence. Let's look at the proof. So the question is, who are the wave sheaf of the living? This is the actual subheading from track number 3, page 80. And we're going to read the next 2 paragraphs because the answer is right here. It reads, just as Christ arose on the very day the sheaf was to be offered, likewise the Holy Spirit fell on the 120 disciples on the very day the wave loaves were to be presented before the Lord. The apostolic Pentecost was accordingly the prototype of the ceremonial Pentecost, the day the wave loaves were offered. And since the wave sheaf was a figure of Christ and those who arose with him as the first of the first fruits of the dead, Hence, the wave loaves were a figure of the 120 Spirit-filled disciples, who were the full complement of the first fruits of the dead, who were gathered in after the resurrection. So it's clearly identifying that the wave loaves of the dead were the 120, but the next paragraph is the key here. It continues on, track 3, page 80. From these facts, it can be more clearly seen that those whom Christ took with him were, what? The living wave sheaf, and the only one that has been offered in the heavenly sanctuary. And as ones raised from the dead, they were the first fruits of the dead, whereas as ones ever living before the Father, they are the living wave sheaf of the first fruits of the living, the 144,000 servants of God. So here it is, right from the golden bowl in plain English, that it's unmistakable that the living wave sheaf are those who are raised with Christ. And how can they fulfill that role? You can say, well, wait a minute, they were resurrected. That's true. They're the wave sheaf for the dead because they came from the grave. However, because they're also ever living, they're also the wave sheaf for the living. And the question becomes, well, who offered up the wave sheaf living in 1844? Who was alive then? Well, these people are. So we have to take the rod as it reads. We can't read into it what we think it says. The living wave sheaf are those who are resurrected with Christ. It's unmistakable. And this is confirmed in a consolidated summary or focus in the same track, page 85, paragraph 2. And this paragraph reads, just as Christ and those whom he raised and took with him became the prototypical sheaf, betokening the ingathering of the first fruits, the 120, of those who are to be resurrected, so also, notice that word also, this is showing us that there's an additional meaning. When he entered upon his priestly ministration in the first apartment of the heavenly sanctuary and presented himself and his trophies before the Father, they, referring to those who he raised, became the antitypical sheaf, betokening the ingathering of the first fruits of those who are to be translated, the 144,000 living saints. So they became the living wave sheaf as well. And in the last sentence, in the light of this parallel, the spiritual condition of the 120 before the apostolic Pentecost is clearly seen to typify the spiritual condition of the 144,000 before the future Pentecost. So we see here that Christ and those whom he raised served as the wave sheaf for the dead and also the wave sheaf for the living. And they can do that because they're ever living before the Father. They're still alive. They were alive in 1844. They're alive today. They don't come from they're not saints that are laying in the grave. They are ever living. So when we get back to our chart here, at the top, 1844, the question is, who was offered up in the heavenly sanctuary as the wave sheaf for the living? And the answer is unmistakable. It's Christ and those who are resurrected with him. And then later, in the gathering of the first fruits, the final product will be the wave loaves, the 144,000, that will receive the second Pentecostal power, and then gather the second fruits of the living, the great multitude, and then bringing the final close of probation. So the answer is really right there in the rod. Why is it that people come up with other ideas? Well, it's probably because we don't really study like we should, or we listen to different opinions and we're led astray. But the key is we need to go by teach only that which is published, found in the golden bowl. So summarizing, those that arose with Christ are, 1, the antitypical wave sheaf for the dead. That's unmistakable. 2, they are the first of the first fruits of the dead. 3, they are also the living wave sheaf for the first fruits of the living, the 144,000. So that's unmistakable. Now, who are the 120 disciples? Well, they're the antitypical wave loaves of the dead, and they're the first fruits of the Pentecostal harvest, those to be resurrected. And you can confirm that in 2TG number 46, page 27. and they also are a type of the 144,000. They're the wave loaves of the dead. So then who becomes the wave loaves of the living? Well, the 144,000 are the wave loaves of the living, the complement, the recipient of the second Pentecostal power. So this is all logical. It fits together. Everything lines up. There's no contradiction. This is irrefutable. So this brings up another essential question. How did the Vanguard fit in here? Who are the Vanguard found in Leviticus page 3? Well, I'm going to give you 3 answers based on teachings that are circulating amongst Davidians. One's got to be right and the other 2 are wrong. So we got to figure out which is which. 1. A. Those with the 144,000 who die in the faith of 3 angels' message from 1844 up to Ezekiel 9. This is a new view that's being promoted by Harold Gillimus, the Davidian reformer. Is it right or is it wrong? Well, it's clearly false, because the Vanguard are called the first of the first fruits of the living. But this group that those with die. They come from the grave. So this is totally illogical that a group of dead saints can become the Vanguard. They aren't. Well, is there another possibility? B. It's a smaller portion of the 144,000 living saints. And C, here's another view, it's another group of living saints in addition to the 144,000 who will come from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is a view that's being taught of the living those with. That's common from Salem and Donna Dare, who got it from Bingham, M.J. Bingham and the Bashan group. So, and also Lennox Sam teaches a version of this. So the Vanguard is another group of those with, and this is clearly false. We've exposed that in previous posts and studies, and if you would like proof of that, we'll be happy to provide it for you. Please contact us at the address at the end of this presentation. So we soundly can eliminate C, and the choice comes between A and B. And the only answer that is in harmony with the rod is B. Okay, because the Vanguard are the first of the first fruits of the living. They're not dead saints. They don't come from the grave. That's obvious. And let's hear the rod, what the rod says. This is the quote from Leviticus page 3. It reads, "The name Davidian, deriving from the name of the king of ancient Israel, accrues to this association by reason of its following aspects. First, it is dedicated to the work of announcing and bringing forth the restoration, as predicted in Hosea 1:11 and 3:5, of David's kingdom in Antitype, upon the throne of which Christ, the son of David, is to sit. Second, it," referring to the association, "purports itself to be the first of the first fruits of the living," not the dead, "of the living, the Vanguard, from among whom the present-day descendants of those Jews who composed the early Christian church. With the emergence of this Vanguard and its army, the first fruits, from which are elected the 12,000 out of each of the 12 tribes of Jacob, the 144,000, who stand in Mount Zion with the Lamb, the reign of antitypical David begins." So we see here clearly that the Vanguard and its army are called the first fruits. The Vanguard, more specifically, is the first of the first fruits, not of the dead, but of the living. And there's only one other reference, and the rod refers to the first of the first fruits, and it's this one here in Timely Greetings, Volume 1, number 23, page 29, published in 1946. And it's indicating our privileges. It reads, "The Lord wants us to know that when He turns away our captivity, He will also make us a name and a praise among all the people of the earth. This kingdom of Judah, the church purified and set apart, is therefore not only premillennial, but also probationary. And how glad we ought to be for this privilege to be among the first of the first fruits." Now, who's the we? Well, it's clearly whoever is reading that Timely Greetings. It first came out in 1946, so the question is, how many of those people that read this in 1946 are still alive? Probably most of them are not, if any. if you look at the construct of the sentence, it's talking about ultimately whoever reads that. What about people today? We still have that privilege. So even though Brother Houteff wrote this and Davidians that read that back then had the privilege to be among them, as time went on, nobody knew how long things were going to go on. They have passed into the grave. Is that a problem? No. They'll be part of the special resurrection, those that die in the faith through angels' message. So they'll be saved, and they'll come up after Ezekiel 9 in the kingdom. But the we, in the present tense, is those that will ultimately be the first of the first fruits, that portion of the 144,000 that will never taste death, that will be translated. Nobody can determine that. And we'll get to that in a minute, is the claim that, oh, you can identify the Vanguard today. You cannot. All we know is that they will be the first of the first fruits. So this brings up another essential question. Once again, revisiting our question, who are the Vanguard? A, those who die with the those with the 144,000 who die in the faith through angels' message, teaching of Harold Julimus, and this is patently false, because the living are translated. They never taste death, okay? They don't die. They don't come from the grave. So A is clearly false. B, smaller portion of the 144,000. That's logical. That's consistent. It doesn't go beyond what is revealed. It's clearly true. And C, of course, is the teaching of Donna Dare, Salem, and Bashan about another group of living saints, which we flatly reject. There will be only 144,000 saved alive from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So the answer is B here on this one. So what conclusions are true here? This is that those that come up in the special resurrection of Daniel 12:2 are, and this is the conclusions of Harold Julimus, they're the living wave sheaf, they're the wave sheaf of the living, and 2, they're the Vanguard. And we've just shown that this is patently false. Dead saints cannot represent a living wave sheaf, or the Vanguard, who are the first of the first fruits of the living. So these are patently false. This is false, uninspired teaching. Next, is the following conclusion correct? If you got it wrong, if you accept the falsehood here, then you're going to come to the following conclusion. Is it correct that the first fruits of the living are all those that die in the faith through angels' message, plus the 144,000? Well, if you buy a lie, then you'll follow into the next trap. And the answer is no, this is an incorrect conclusion. So it begs the question, which formula is correct? There's only one's got to be right and one's wrong. A, the Vanguard plus Army equals 144,000, no more, no less. Or B, that the Vanguard plus the Army is greater than 144,000. And the answer is A, because the Vanguard are not dead saints. They come, they're first fruits of the living. So them plus the Army is a total number of the 144,000. So you see how easily it is, if you accept the false premise, that you come to a faulty conclusion and are easily led astray. Let us come back and follow the teaching of the original shepherd's rod. Get our doctrines, our brother, sister, from the golden bowl, and not from the head bowl of Harold Julimus. So, 2 final points to consider regarding the Vanguard. And we published this some time ago. God has always had a Vanguard, because people are confused. Well, who's the Vanguard today? They're following claims. Oh, the Vanguard's over there in Salem. I mean, I've heard Donna Dare imply it, and maybe Bashan thinks they're the Vanguard, or Lennox Sam people think they're the Vanguard. But the question is, what is a Vanguard? Well, God has always had a Vanguard to advance present truth in every generation. The 12 apostles were a Vanguard for the early Christian church. Brother Houteff spoke to Davidians in his day about the privilege of being a Vanguard. Okay, now all of those folks are passed in the grave, but the Vanguard and its army spoken of in Leviticus page 3 is yet future. Remember, this Vanguard is a living group of saints. They will be translated. They'll never taste death. So the key is they're yet future and will be fully manifest after Ezekiel 9 during the period of the kingdom and the proclamation loud cry. So we come back once again to the formula. Vanguard plus army equals 144,000. No more, no less. So for anybody to step up and claim that they're a Vanguard or they're part of the Vanguard is clearly presumption. It's going too far. We don't know who will be in that number or who will be of that group, but we know that they're the ones that will be clearly identified. They will be advancing present truth in this generation, and we'll know who they are soon enough. But let's not engage in speculation or private opinions. Now, what's interesting is this controversy brought up, the Harold Julimus study on the Vanguard and its army brought up some other interesting points. And that's always, we find that useful, is whenever controversy comes, we have to examine every position we taught, and it may allow us to correct ideas that we once held as true. And here's the passage. It's one that he used to prove that the Vanguard are those that die in the faith of the three angels' message. Well, that's false, but here's the key passage. It's called "To Gather Another Class Defiled with Women as Second Fruits." It's 9-track, page 56. Now, this is a very key text that's used by Salem and Bashan to defend their idea of the living those with. Now, we know that's false, but the question is here in this passage. Let's read it. "This class of saints must be those who have at one time been married to some unchristian mistress, a heathen church, and who consequently are not descendants of either Jacob or the Christian church. So there are to be two harvests, one from the church and one from the world. The record of the former mentions only Israelites, the 144,000, those not defiled with women, though it does not say there may not be others. While the record of the latter, however, definitely embraces a great multitude from all nations, which must necessarily be both of undefiled and defiled ones, Jews and Gentiles." So the question becomes, who are these others? So this is the big question, the essential question here. Who are the others in 9-track, page 56? And these are the different ideas that are being promoted out there. A, those with the 144,000 who die in the faith of the three angels' message from 1844 up to Ezekiel 9. B, part of the great multitude who have Jewish blood. And or C, another group of living saints in addition to the 144,000 who will come from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So which one's correct? Well, answer C is the teaching, the justification used by Salem and Don Adair for another group of living saints. So we have already proven that one to be false, so that is clearly rejected. So now we come back to the question of, is it A or B? We have taught in the past that it's part of the great multitude who have Jewish bloods. That was our attempt to explain to others in that passage. However, this current controversy has caused us to re-examine our position, and is it possible we can unlearn something? Most certainly. And so we're thankful to God that as we studied this out, we came to consensus that the only obvious and clear answer in harmony with the rod is A, that the others mentioned in 9-track 56 are those with the 144,000 who die in the faith of the three angels' message from 1844 up to Ezekiel 9. So we accept that correction and strive to come into harmony with what is taught in the original rod. So we're thankful to God for that. So what's a summary of our study today? 1. The antitypical wave sheaf of the living offered in 1844 is Christ and those who are resurrected with him and are ever living in the heavenly sanctuary. So that's irrefutable. We can't get around it. Therefore, the teaching of Harold Julimus that the antitypical wave sheaf of the living are those who die in the faith of the three angels' message has no foundation in the original shepherd's rod. That's unmistakable. Next, the Vanguard, the first of the first fruits of the living, are a smaller portion of the first fruits, the 144,000. So Vanguard plus Army equals 144,000. That's unmistakable logic. Therefore, the teaching of Harold Julimus that the Vanguard are those who die in the faith of the three angels' message has no basis in reality. And finally, the others mentioned in 9-track 56 are indeed those who die in the faith of the three angels' message. So what we've done is to come into harmony and willing to unlearn anything that's out of sync or out of harmony with the rod, and to harmonize everything based on that which is published. So we thank God for this opportunity to present this to you. We appeal for all to come back to the platform of the original rods and to CC from any man, including Harold Gillimus, who would teach you anything other than that which is published. So for more information, if you have any further questions, comments, or would like to request an outline of the study as a PDF document, or obtain a print copy of any of the original track literature, especially track number 3, 3rd edition, that gives the complete details of this most important subject on the wave sheaf of the living, or to arrange for a study at your convenience, then please feel free to contact us anytime. Here's our email, phone number. You can text us. You can also connect with us on WhatsApp or visit our website, whiteparish.org. We thank you for your time, and may God richly bless your search for truth as for hidden treasure, and to CC from all men whose breath are in their nostrils. Godspeed.